educational leader June On, Education, where he directs the Design and Partnership Lab, or the DAP Lab, and is the founding director of the Orange County Educational Advancement Network, or OCEAN. Dr. On combines expertise in participatory design methods for education and conducts research on what is possible with new media and learning technologies. In OCEAN, he has created a school-wide initiative that matches UCI faculty and doctoral students with community partners to create research that directly aligns with community needs. His past and current projects range from designing social media tools for children's science learning, alternate reality games for STEM learning with NASA, the Smithsonian Institution, and Computer History Museum, data visualization platforms that foster pedagogical change with mathematics teachers, STEM learning installations that are designed into city spaces that foster family interaction, and AI tools that help with college and career mentorship. Introducing Dr. June On.
All right, can everybody hear me okay in the back? Yeah, great. So when I was asked to give this Spark talk to provoke some thoughts, organize us together as a summit, I of course started out with a big theme, so AI being the big theme here of our summit, and also the letter E for education, our educational endeavor that we're all trying to promote here. But I'm gonna do a little switcheroo in my talk. What I really wanna talk about is how we're amplifying our intentions for education and how we might start to think about equity in more nuanced ways. And the reason I want to talk about that is because I want to directly address a common theme that has been coming up in our morning conversation here, which is every time a new educational technology arises, we're always faced with this dilemma. In the history of EdTech research, we always see that the technology opens our imaginations up to what is possible, our aspirations for doing things differently. But we also always see that implementation in the classroom looks very different. It's very complicated. Classrooms are complex organizations, school districts are complex organizations, and we often don't see the promise of the technology that is coming about. So how do we deal with this dissonance? One way that I am thinking about this dissonance, from a personal example, so on the left-hand side is the headshot that I use for all of my websites and university social media accounts and things of that nature. This is from like 12 years ago, so even this headshot's pretty outdated. So I decided to create a new headshot for this event. Used a generative AI tool, gave it some of my images, and gave it some prompts. I think this is a really good kind of analogy for me on the dissonance between reality and our aspirations. So I think it's pretty good. I think it's about 70% there, which kind of is like how large language models are working out for me right now. It's about 70% there. And the things that it does well, I think it captures my essence a little bit. But the funny part of this is I like the right-hand image in that headshot because it feels like it's a good headshot for starring in my own Korean drama on Netflix, right? So that might be a good aspiration. I kind of like this, but there's a dissonance with the reality. In seriousness, what I really want to talk to you about is how we make sense of the gap. So I'm talking to my educator friends out here, and as a former middle school and high school educator and school administrator, that we will see the real consequences of AI, right? But we also, in this summit and in all the meetings that you're going to be in, you're going to see the potential for good that we could also do, right? How do we make sense of this gap? I want to give you a couple of provocations and a couple of heuristics to think about as we go through this summit together. So 3 frames that I'd like to introduce in my 9, 10 minutes that I have left with you. So first is this idea of a theory of amplification really drives my own research. So Dr. Kentaro Toyama at the University of Michigan has written a book about this and promotes this idea. But really it's that technology actually doesn't cause anything. So technology doesn't cause learning. It doesn't cause us to reduce inequality. Right? These are the problems that we are concerned with as educators. Technology actually amplifies our underlying human factors that are already there. So what that really means this is another 2-hour slide, but in 30 seconds, what I would love and challenge us to do in this summit is to think about the statements we're making. So if our aspiration is for technology to reduce inequality, that's probably an inaccurate statement, right? What we should really be looking at is what are our organizations doing to reduce inequality? How are our societies structured to reduce inequality? And how do we want to then design AI tools to accelerate that, right? So the AI tool is not going to be the tool that saves us, right? It's the tool that actually accelerates our intentions. So that leads to my second point. What that means for me as an educator and as an education researcher is for us to think about what our intentions are for education when we're sharing our best practices, when we're sharing new ideas for how to use AI. And I want to give you a couple of examples from my own work, particularly with AUHSD. But here's a kind of a thought experiment that I would love for everyone to engage in. Whether or not we want to explicitly admit this or not, we have structured our education systems to serve one function, which is to grade and sort students, right? We do lots of things, but that is also one of the functions of our education system, right? And if we're honest about that, there's a logical kind of corollary to the AI tools we could build, which is to accelerate the grading and sorting of students, right? And that acceleration is probably going to be the unintended consequences that you'll start to notice, right? Another example of this is we often think about our K-12 education system as really needing to provide those foundational basic skills for every student, right? That's a valid goal. But this amplification idea and our intention idea naturally lets us understand that if we create AI tools just to teach basic skills, we may be improving on that, but we'll run up against a conundrum, which is we're also creating AI tools that will replace those basic skills, right? And we're increasingly realizing that it's the human factor, the ingenuity, the collaboration, the adaptability, the flexibility. Like those are the skills that actually are going to accelerate young people, right? So just thought experiments there because I'm going to use that kind of structure. The last thought, the third thought I'd like to leave you with is to be very explicit as we talk with each other and learn with each other in the next 2 days about what our definitions of equity are. So what I mean by that is I will guarantee you that a lot of our conversations of equity will be around access. Very good goal, big goal. And it'll probably be things around skills and student achievement and narrowing the gaps, right? That's often how we talk about equity here. But I want to give you a couple of alternative ways to open up our imagination for how to think about equity because it matters for how we build tools. So I'll give you a couple of humble, sacrificial offerings of work that I'm doing in my research lab. So we are the Design Partnership Lab, the DAP Lab. Feel free to dap me up if you see me throughout the conference. And I offer these just as kind of thought experiments for you about how we try to think about these ideas differently. So the first project that we're working on is focused on fostering occupational identity for young people. This is funded by the Gates Foundation. And just to give you that kind of thought process we went through. So imagine if we're working from a framework that education is a grading and sorting mechanism, right? A very logical tool, and I say this with no value judgment, a very logical tool would be to create ways to tell students what they're suited for in their careers. It's also a very valid way to think about the idea. It also reminds me of like dystopian science fiction. Like we could go down that route very easily, right? The way that the DAP Lab and how we're thinking about this was to actually study the research about how young people develop deep identities towards career pathways. And if you actually think about highly resourced and privileged communities, those families are not thinking about telling my kid what they should be when they grow up. Those communities are focused on thinking of the hidden curriculum of developing a career. Let's think about how we all got to where we are, right? That hidden curriculum involves knowing who to connect with, what questions to ask people, what experiences to get myself into, right? these are what we call the hidden curriculum. So we asked ourselves as a lab, how could we then use AI to amplify the learning of that hidden curriculum, right? So this is what we're trying to do right now. It's a very simple tool that we prototyped where young people actually just share aspects of their anxieties, their imaginations, their plans for the future, and we actually engineered an AI helper that synthesizes their reflections and gives them kind of like what we call a careergram. It's like a report that says, hey, this is what we hear you thinking about, and you know, it actually might be useful for you to go talk to a mentor about X, Y, and Z, right? It's a very simple idea, and we're starting to do research on this, and what we're learning, particularly with undergraduate college students, is that when I send my careergram to a mentor before I go to their office hours or something, the nature of the conversation changes drastically, right? So me as a professor hits close to home because I often have students come and they want to meet with me, but they don't know what to talk to me about, right? And what we're finding in our research evaluations of our prototype is that the students now have something to talk about, right? They now know that deeper question to ask, right? And so we're thinking of AI here, right? Not as a grader, not as some telling you what you should do, but actually as a facilitator of deeper interaction, right? A second example is a project dear to me that is a collaboration with AUHSD here, actually. And when I started working with AUHSD, I learned that one of the big drivers, missions of the district were to really value these skills, right? These skills that are going to be the differentiators in the future, what the district calls the 5 Cs. This project is funded by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and it's the same kind of thought process I want to offer you here. So if we have an inherent mental model that education, again, is a sorting mechanism for society, it's a very logical step, right, to create tools that grade students on their skills, right, and to tell them you're doing well on this skill and you're not doing well on this skill, right? You can imagine the acceleration of that kind of mental model, right? So we came in as a partnership and thought about this a little bit differently, and this mission comes from the district. Kind of why I love working with y'all, because this is like coming from you all. And so what if we think about education as centering student voice and reflecting their funds of knowledge, right? What if AI then instead could be designed not as a grader, but as a tool that reveals the funds of knowledge that students have, right? Could that change a system? So very similar to the CareerGram project, we're trying to co-create tools where students can reflect on their assignments and projects and life experiences. We're actually designing an AI system that pulls out the kinds of collaboration they're talking about, the kinds of leadership, creativity, creative thinking. So we're trying to pull it out from the student's language, right? And that's an affordance that we couldn't do before, but now we can because we can experiment with large language models, right? Before we had to give a test, because that was the only efficient technology we had, right, to assess something. But now we can experiment with thinking about these skills from the student's perspective. The research on this, actually, I made a note to myself. I'm going to look directly in the camera. Right at this moment, we also have AUHSD students at UC Irvine with my students in the DAP lab, and they're watching this live stream, so I want to give you a shout out right now. And the students are actually going to be co-designing the dashboards of how they would see their own data. And we're going to integrate that with the district's tools. And so this is kind of the partnership process that the panel in the beginning was talking about, right? It's like this is a way to give students voice in the creation of their own tools. But what's really cool about this interface is we're thinking about the tool not as a report card for students, but as a tool for students to collect their experiences, right? And to demonstrate the kinds of 5 Cs that they're collecting over their lifetime. Okay, so research is ongoing. This is the very first year of our pilot. We piloted this in the fall with teachers and our instructional coaches at AUHSD. We're collecting data. I will tell you, it's a very messy process. So that 70% there, we're like kind of 70% there with the technical infrastructure, right? And it's a constant process for us. But we're also learning that we have to work together with the district to think about the shifting of those mindsets, of how we might use the technology together, right? And this is where I give all of the credit to the educators in the room, right? Back to that amplification theory, our AI tool is not going to be the causal factor here, right? The causal factor is going to be all the instructional coaches, all the teachers working with us to tweak this tool to amplify your process, right? So I'm excited to share that research probably next year. But so I will end with these thoughts. Please come and talk with us more in depth about our work. We'll be presenting both of these projects in more in-depth sessions. But I want to end with some ways that we might be critical friends to one another as we're going to sessions, learning about really exciting possibilities. And that is really asking these things of each other. Let's think about what intentions this new idea is actually trying to promote and how the use of the AI is intended to amplify that intention, right? That's kind of a common vocabulary we can use. And another is to think about what notions of equity we're implying with our solutions here. So, and it's okay to admit that. It's okay to say we're focused on test scores or we're focused on reducing gaps, right? I tend to like to think about AI as how could it amplify the connections we make with one another? How could we use AI to build richer interactions around the learning? Because I think that's where the magic is going to be. But generally, I think it would be super helpful to be critical friends with one another and ask each other, what is our intention? What are we amplifying? And I think that will be the secret magic sauce of reducing that dissonance between reality and aspiration. Right? And I will try to figure out how to reduce the dissonance of my profile pictures in the future. But thank you very much.